information that's in here really does apply across all older people. And then we're going to look a little bit deeper into the financial abuse, specifically from a Te Ao Māori kind of perspective. There's financial abuse is not the only abuse that older people experience, but today specifically, that is the kaupapa. The next part is we're going to look and identify some of the barriers to often why our kaumātua stay silent. Then I'm going to do a little bit more in-depth kōrero around the toolkit itself, so utilising the framework and how that might be able, how you might be able to incorporate that into your everyday work. And finally, at the end, is really about what role you can play and what are the next steps. So just some practical actions that you can really start embedding from today onwards. So I did talk a little bit about, and Kate did an amazing introduction into Kete Tiaki, so I don't feel it's something I need to spend a lot of time on. So I'm just going to skip past this part and actually head into, well, who are kaumātua? And this is a question that does keep popping up. Now, there is no one way to identify what is kaumātua, and kaumātua can be either speaking about wahine, speaking about tane, speaking about ia, so it is not specific to gender. It is also someone that we do identify as older than 65. That is not a cultural identification. That is more an identification that I guess generally makes things a little bit easier in terms that we are speaking about older people. But within our culture, a kaumātua can be someone who holds great knowledge, who holds wisdom, who holds mātauranga, and you don't need to be over the age of 65 to be able to hold that. But generally, when we think about our kaumātua, they are people who preserve our traditions, our knowledge, they give spiritual guidance, they hold wisdom and insight, they provide leadership to their whānau and community, and they often live multi-generational lives, which means that for Māori whānaus, we live in collectives most often, not always, but I think what it does give is a perspective around, for the toolkit anyway, who we're actually talking about. Just a little bit of a note, I want to be really clear is that not all kaumātua are the same. There is great diversity among older people in Māori communities. You do not need to be the person giving the whai kōrero at the marae to hold mana in yourself. A kaumātua is because you have some of the observations that we've kind of noted here. Kia ora. So elder abuse is more common than what we think. What we know, and this is this first stat here is from Age Concern, 10% of all older New Zealanders are estimated to experience some form of elder abuse. And then on the other end, we've got 75% of all abuse cases for older people are actually unreported. And that's from Health New Zealand. And we know that many remain unreported due to shame and fear. And of 50% of those cases, financial abuse is the most common form of abuse reported. And just a little note is that Māori service providers report that older Māori face higher levels of abuse and are more likely to experience multiple types of abuse at the same time. And some of the drivers of that can include material hardship, cultural disconnection, and systemic barriers. And there are many other drivers, but I think these were some of the common ones that were kind of identified. So I did share that there were a whole range of types of older people abuse that include psychological, financial, which is what today's focus is on, physical, cultural, institutional, neglect and exploitation. And I think too, part of Kete Tiaki, one of the things that we had identified were cultural abuses isn't just about requesting cultural specific, I guess, support or guidance from older people, such as you may have heard the term Daila kaumātua, which is quite a very racist term. But what that really essentially means is that we see value in kaumātua when we need the hui to be open. Right? And that's the only value we give them. One of the things that we discovered through developing Kete Tiaki were some of that kind of cultural disconnect. So not being able to have mokopuna come into spaces, which is very normal. Not being able to have karakia when potentially you're opening up a new bank account. And for some of our kaumātua, these things were really important, but they were also denied. And so again, in most cases, kaumātua experience more than one type of abuse, but actually all older people experience more than one type of abuse. It is not just specific to Māori. And we know that financial abuse is really isolated. And so what financial abuse looks like. So some of the observations you may see, things like unusual or large withdrawals from accounts, another person controlling the transaction, kaumātua might appear confused, anxious, fearful. Signatures on documents may just look a little bit off. Some unpaid bills, despite knowing that actually this person does have some income and they do have some assets. And another one is to not allowed to speak privately with a professional. And while these are observations, I think it's always extremely important to really understand that through the lens of culture. One of the key insights I've popped in is that the person using abuse can be, and often is, a trusted person, family member, a close contact. However, for many older people, particularly for Māori as well, it can be really normal for others to assist with financial matters and including sharing of money. And so why this is really important to really talk about is because we need to really understand what financial abuse looks like through our own lenses first. So really recognizing what your personal values are, what your personal biases might be, and what you think is really normal. Doesn't mean that when other cultures and other people behave in ways that might challenge that, that it's actually wrong. What we're trying to say is that these are some observations. This is about you, what you're seeing, and then checking in with yourself around what are some of the things I can do to check in to make sure this kaumātua, this older person, is safe and is giving or is consenting to whatever it is that they are coming to see you about. Why kaumātua not speak up? There is actually lots of reasons why older people don't speak up about abuse. One of the biggest reasons is that they are so feared of not being believed, so that they worry that they'll be dismissed or doubted, or actually threatening their dignity, their mana, which might lead to further isolation. Shame and embarrassment. There's so much feelings of guilt and whakama that makes disclosures very difficult, especially when money is involved. The fear of consequences. So reporting may lead to worse treatment, loss of family relationships, especially mokopuna ties, and the loss of systems that they rely on. One of the key things that our kaumātua shared with us is why they don't speak up is because they are so fearful of not having a relationship with their mokopuna. When we think about the relationship with mokopuna, that relationship is greater than their own personal selves. So it really does give an understanding of why that will prevent a kaumātua or older people from actually speaking up. And the protection whānau connection. So speaking up can and does damage important family bonds. It does create conflict. They also share with us that they don't want their or the person they love and care for going into jail, getting in trouble with the police, maybe being removed from the home, even if that is the person using the abuse. And one of the things too, why I just wanted to quickly share is that in terms of languaging, we actually say the words the person using the abuse rather than a perpetrator or an abuser. So that's why, because some people ask me, why do you put a person using abuse? So it's just a language thing, really. Not knowing that it's abuse, and some may recognize what's happening as abuse, particularly some of the financial manipulation or borrowing. One of the stories I really wanted to share was there, and I had permission from this kuia or older wahine, who said that her mokopuna would take her card, would go and pay for some of her bills, would go and pick up kai for her, and would bring it back, and would also freely take around $20 to $40 each time she would do that. Now, this wasn't something she discussed, it wasn't something that the nanny had agreed to, but she knew it was happening. And for the nanny herself, she didn't see it as abuse because she felt that it was really normal and it was okay for her mokopuna to do, and that they had a relationship where she could take money from her nan. But one of the biggest, I guess, realizations for this nan was that she never had enough money to last through the week. Power was getting cut off. She couldn't pick up medication. She wasn't able to do the things that she would normally do. She couldn't attend waiata classes. And so she did recognise that because her mokopuna was taking putia or money from her, that it meant that actually she was now experiencing a disadvantage and some harm because of that. Her life wasn't fulfilling as it was before her mokopuna was actually taking that money. And so we actually had to work with the nan a little bit to really be able to pull to the surface around her understanding of abuse. And so we actually had to work with the whole whānau, because what was really evident was that the mokopuna herself did not believe it was abuse. The parents did not believe that it was abuse. And I'm really mindful around putting labels onto whānau and saying, actually, it is abuse, because that is my perspective of this situation. So it's about educating whānau. It's about letting them know what abuse actually looks like, and then still supporting the whānau around the ability to make decision around what's helpful and what's harmful. And if by the end of that situation, that whānau came back and said, we still don't believe that that's abusive, that's also okay for us. We're like, that's fine, because this is about educating whānau. But in this particular scenario, the whānau did come back and go, actually, now that we're aware, now that we know, we actually do see that it is abusive in what we're doing. And so therefore, these are the changes we're going to make. And there's also a distrust in services. So, I mean, historically, Māori always distrust services because there's a lack of confidence that services can provide help, and the help that they receive will be meaningful, will be culturally appropriate, and will actually make changes, significant changes that really impact their lives. And so that's a historical kind of behavior. And one of our goals is to really start to rebuild whānau trust in services in ours. You know, we're not separate to services. So if we can build that really strong trust with us, that our whānau, including kaumātua, will then be able to move and shift into other services, taking that confidence with them. What we ask is that we can't do that on our own. We know there's some credible organisation services that already do that. We're just asking for services just to be really mindful. And we all have a role to play. So the toolkit really identifies the role of business and systems as critical. And I pulled that out of the toolkit mainly because I'm really trying to understand everyone here today that's coming in, maybe what would be of most help for you. And so some of the things that I guess the development really told us is that creating culturally age-friendly environments is really, is part of the role to support the responding to, but really the prevention of abuse in older people. Challenge ageism and biases in your processes. Train staff to recognise signs of financial abuse, and services accessible and culturally safe. So it's so important that even if you're training your team, your staff around financial abuse, that actually we put the lens around and what does that mean from that cultural perspective, because that is just as important. And review policies that may inadvertently disadvantage kaumātua, disadvantage older people. And so that's kind of from a workplace kind of systems perspective. And then you as a person, as an individual, because you either have older people in your life that you love and care for, or if we're really lucky enough, we will become an older person in someone else's life, and they will love and care for us. And we want to make sure that we're creating future environments that are suitable now, but also for the future. And so some of the questions I ask you to really think about is, what is it that you notice? Can you offer to speak privately with the kaumātua? How are you being sensitive to the kōrero or to the situation at hand? So don't interrogate, don't assume things. Also, what is the referral pathway? If you think that there are some observations and you are concerned about that, what are the systems internally that support you to make a referral? Balance vigilance with respecting the person's wishes. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, yes, there might be observations that you think this is potentially, financial abuse, but also at the same time, if we've got someone saying, actually, no, my mokopuna is here to help me, and this is very normal, then we have to be really respectful of that as well. And then we come down to the real guts of the toolkit, which is the framework. We just use the A-E-I-O-U framework, which was actually originally developed by Michael Naira and Māpahi Raharuhi as part of a Kia Piki Te Ora kaupapa. And then it was eventually adapted by Blueprint Mental Health 101, but it was a framework that I think has been really helpful. And so we've kind of reached out and said, look, can we utilize the framework to be able to align with our toolkit? And so the framework really just talks about ask, which is whanaungatanga. So what is whanaungatanga? Whanaungatanga can be lots of different things. And I know if you're on a call center and if you're answering the phone, maybe some of those things might be a little bit more difficult. But whanaungatanga really is about connection. How do you connect with someone? How do you make someone feel respected? And how do you make someone feel really valued? And I think even in a phone call, those things are absolutely possible. But also if someone's coming into the space, kind of making that connection. And it can be as simple as something like noticing the hat that you're wearing. I really love that hat. I used to have a hat that was similar. And it may seem really like menial, but it's actually really important, because what you're doing is you're allowing that other person to go, actually, there's a little bit of a connection there. And that's what starts to build the trust and rapport. And trust and rapport is going to be very important in terms of people feeling like you are a person that they may be able to share concerns with or be really open around what's actually happening for them. Insurers around kind of ensuring the ability to have open, safe kōrero. And so that might mean having a space that you ask the person, are we able to go and have a kōrero in a closed room often? And the bank's just popping into my head. Nothing against banks at all, but you're often having to have really sensitive conversations with people out in the open. And so being able to say, actually, do we have a space that I know that we can take the person in and we can have a conversation with? But even if we're talking to someone on the phone, if the person who's using abuse is actually around that person, how are you ensuring that you're able to have a really safe conversation? Some of the questions that I've asked are, can I just check, am I on speakerphone? So that's one way I might just check in. If I have to leave a message, I don't self-identify who I am or where I'm from. I'm just going to say something like, I'm going to use Kate's name. Kia ora, Kate, Danielle here. Give me a call back when you can. So I'm not disclosing that I'm from an elder abuse response service. I'm not even disclosing I'm from Te Ahi Kaa. I'm actually just letting the person know that I'm just making a phone call. Can you please give me a call back? Or if I'm ringing a person and I ask, is Kate there? And the person's like, no, who is this? I'm like, sorry, I'll give Kate a call a little bit later. I won't actually engage in any conversation. I will just end that phone call. So these are some of the ways that we can keep the environment really safe for everyone in general. It doesn't just apply for kaumātua. But these are things that I'm really, really mindful of. And so I think in part of your work, if these are good conversations you can have with yourself, your colleagues, or with, with kind of more externally, internally, sorry, within your own organization, so that you feel really comfortable and confident in how to have safe, engaging kōrero. And identify is really looking at what are the strengths and safety that that person has. And so that might be things like, can you tell me when you're feeling really unsure? Is there someone you can go to in your family? And what that's going to do, it's going to identify a safe person for them. And so if it's a person that lives with them, that's great, but it also gives you good knowledge and information around, okay, they've got people in their space that they feel really safe with. And it really does depend on the context and the situations and when we're engaging with kaumātua and older people. But looking at strengths and safety is going to be really different if you're working in if you're an elder abuse response service provider, like we are, like Age Concerners and many others. Strengths and safety is going to be a very different conversation to if you're a power company and you're having a conversation with someone on the phone. But know that you will always be able to find strengths and safety, even in really short engagements. Offer is options and decisions. So we always talk about shared decision making. And so for older people, particularly if we are working with people who have dementia or who have disabilities, we want to make sure that we are engaging in what's called shared decision making. So we have to constantly ask ourselves, are the decisions being made the decisions of the older person? Are they the ones truly, and we call it navigating the waka, are they the ones really navigating the waka? Or are we doing that? Or are their family doing that? Or the other people around doing that? And so that's part of our role, is to ensure and to have that kind of bird's eye perspective. We refer to it like as the manual, which is the reference to a bird kind of looking down and being able to see the entire environment and landscape, and ask ourselves, is that older person the person actually making the decisions? And when you are working with someone who might have dementia or might have other abilities to in terms of their ability to make decisions, the first thing I say is never assume that they can't. There could be lots of different reasons. There could be language barriers. There could be a person could just be feeling really unwell. There is multiple reasons why maybe on this particular day the person doesn't seem capable of making decisions, but almost every person we've worked with can make decisions. And it's really important that the opportunity is provided for them to be able to share what those decisions are. We will use a whole lot of different language aids, I guess. We have used everything from waiata. We've had older people play waiata, and we will go back and we will look at the words, the kupu and the waiata, and that is them being able to tell us what they're thinking and what they're feeling. We've used whakatauki. We've been able to use the physical iPad language boards. So there are different ways that you can ensure that they have options and are able to make decisions, and that we're not making them for them. but there are situations where we might need to support those options and decisions. And use your local supports. There, it isn't just about older abuse providers, but it could be churches, it could be marae, it could be spaces in which older people frequent, or they feel really good in, or they feel really safe in. And so, do you have the ability to have access to some of those supports? Are you able to share those supports with the older person? And if not, what is the process within your organization or where you're working to be able to make a referral on their behalf? But again, it's about working with the your system within the space that you work at to support you. Some of the things to remember is that kaumātua and older people are the experts in their own lives. Be aware of who is around. Is another person controlling that conversation? Can you speak with the kaumātua older person privately? I wanted to share really quickly. There was a situation after my father had passed away. My mum had to go to the bank. Now, if you knew my parents, you knew my mum had never stepped into a bank her entire life, and that's exactly how she liked it. My dad was the money man. He took care of all of that financial stuff. And then, unfortunately, after he had passed, she had to go and she had to start talking to the bank, making some decisions. And so when we did go in, she said to me, "Can you come and support me?" I was like, "Absolutely." So I went in with her. And actually, I felt myself really controlling the conversation, mainly because I knew what my mum was going through. She was heavy in grief. This was 7 days post my dad passing. She didn't want to talk to anyone. It had been years since she had been into a bank. She had no language to really understand the concepts of banking. Um, and what I really enjoyed was that the person I was talking to said, "I really like that you're supporting mum. Can I hear from mum?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, of course you can." My immediate kind of response was to protect my mum. But I also knew that in that particular situation, what we were asking of the bank was a big, big deal. Lots of money was involved. And mum went to the front and she did offer to go into a private room with mum. Mum looked really scared. I said to her, "You can go. It is safe. You will be fine." And mum came out smiling. And so I knew straight away that that was a good experience for her. But I like that the bank teller called me out for it as well. I thanked her for it afterwards. Always ensure you have consent from the older person and that it is given freely. Always ensure you uphold confidentiality and have consent from the older person. Sorry, I've doubled that. Um, Include whānau if it is safe to do so. And so, what is really important, that situation, I go back to my mum. My mum would not have walked into the bank if me or my sister weren't able to go with her that day. So, to exclude us completely would not have been good for her. But really knowing and picking the times when my mum needed to share her kōrero, as opposed to me being able to support and advocate for her, really important. And again, I always go back to reflect on your own values, your experiences, your biases and beliefs. We've had many situations where we've had someone else who's referred a whānau into us for abuse. And really, when we look at it through our lenses, what we saw was a 16-year-old mokopuna looking after her nan, defending her nan, protecting her nan. But to an outsider, what that looked like is it looked like a very aggressive, very controlling 16-year-old. When we were able to go in and work with that particular whānau, what we realized is that she had the weight of an adult on her shoulders, a weight she should never have had to bear. She had been caring for her nan both physically, but also mentally, and she was also caring for some of the younger children in the home. She wasn't able to go to school as often as she wanted. She couldn't hang out with her friends. She wasn't able to go on TikTok. She wasn't able to to join netball, which is something she loved. And so all of a sudden, what we really realized was that the referral should never have come to us in the first place. It should have been picked up really early that we've got this young person who's actually in this situation, was the victim herself. So a victim of not enough support services, not enough home care hours, not enough all of these people coming in to ask why she wasn't going to school. And so what it meant was that was another hurdle for this whānau and for this young 16-year-old. And it just confirmed their mistrust for services once again. So these are the reasons why we say it's really important to really understand what you value and where your biases might be. And I'm not saying that, we all have biases, absolutely, but let's put them on the table. So if they're there, if we're aware of them, we can work with them. It's when we deny and we decline that we have any, that's when it gets a little bit more unsafe for whānau. So some practical actions. When you notice something isn't right, request to speak to the person privately. Ask the person who's supporting them to just step away, a little bit like the example I share with my mum. Use open, non-judgmental questions. Are you comfortable with what's happening? I know that you're transferring $5,000 today. Are you comfortable with that? Check in how the person's responding. Record observations factually, not based off biases. Note what you saw and what you heard. Refer to any of your safeguarding policies if you have any. Consult your manager, talk to colleagues. These things are really important. Culturally safe practice means that you need to allow time. Cannot rush the process with kaumātua or older people. Even if there is a long line behind, I would understand. I've not worked in a bank or even in a scenario like that, but I understand how much pressure there would be on to kind of keep the line moving. It's really important, though, that we actually take time, particularly for our older people. Be aware of any cultural dynamics. So family presence is really normal, but it isn't always safe. Never assume shared experiences. Again, so much diversity among kaumātua. Be open to understanding whakapapa and tikanga and a collective decision making. These are all things that are really important in terms of our cultural practice. And I have heard that there are some guidelines within potentially like the bank systems, although I'm not an expert on that, so I didn't want to talk too deeply about it, to help support staff to recognise financial abuse while being sensitive to kind of the situations. And so I really encourage you to ask whether or not something like that does exist. And if it doesn't, maybe you are the advocate to ensure that that kind of guideline is produced within your company or organisation. This toolkit doesn't take away, it doesn't identify abuse. That's not its purpose. There are other kind of research papers that are out at the moment, I think, looking to understand that better. The toolkit brings the cultural dimension to guidelines. It brings that ability to really understand how do we better engage with Māori and with whānau. Where to go for help and referrals. So the Elder Abuse Response Service is 0800 number, have age concern, and I see the awesome Hani and Kai jumped in. I quickly caught their names, so I just wanted to say kia ora to you both. Te Ahi Kaa, obviously, and also Waikato is a Pacific organisation in South Auckland supporting Pacific matua in terms of elder abuse and neglect. But also here in Pukekohe, we also have My Lighthouse and we have Waiku Family Support that also do this mahi. So it's really important that it's not just one, that you don't just know one provider, that you know of many providers, because in making a referral, we want to make sure that we're making the best referral to the organisation that might be the best to support them at that time. Most of the organisations, we know each other. We have good relationships with each other. If I have a referral and I think, gosh, this might be something that I'm not going to be the best at, I'm going to ring Whaka and ask, hey, can we work on this together, or is this a referral you would prefer to pick up? So just know that we do talk to each other, we know each other really, really well, and we support one another also. Just some key principles. Whanaungatanga is always essential. Give plenty of time. Be open to learning. Check in with colleagues. Support choices. Confidentiality. Kaumātua navigators. Respect cultural diversity. Not even just within Te Ao Māori, across diverse spaces. And practice self-care. This work matters. This work is hard. Please always make sure that you're looking after yourself no matter what. And that is it. And I just want to thank you for your time. I hope that was what you had expected it to be. And I just really, appreciate it. It's really difficult when you can't see people's faces. You don't know if you're on the right track or not. But I just thought, I'm just going to kōrero about what I'm very passionate about. So just, again, thank you for your time. Thank you, Kate, for allowing me time to speak, and really look forward to any questions people might have.
Kia ora, Danielle, and thank you. It was wonderful to see the virtual round of applause and the love being sent out for you and the knowledge that you have on this topic. So thank you so much. It is such a complex space. I'd just like to open up now for Q&A. So if anyone has a question, please pop it into the chat, into the Q&A box, and we'll keep our eye on that. But I've got a bunch of questions and a few things I'd just love to shout out. So one, I love the bank experience that you had. I know it's not always good for everybody, and it can be quite dependent on who you might end up sitting with, but I think that's an awesome outcome. And I really loved how they said, I really like how you're supporting, so using the positive, but then also recognizing that perhaps your mum wasn't getting a word in.
Absolutely.
So, I think that was a really cool thing, and thank you for sharing that. What I really love about the framework, the REEOU framework, is that it's it's such a powerful framework, but also I love that it's effectively scaffolding, right? And that it means each organization can then build on it. So it's not like everyone has the same color house or uses the same materials, but they can use that as the scaffolding and then build on it in a way that works within the way that their organization operates. Because as you pointed out, banks in particular already have certain frameworks or ways of spotting financial abuse or different methods and things going on within the organization. So it can just be incorporated into the work that's already going on.
Absolutely.
Or if an organization doesn't currently have a framework, they can use this as the scaffolding to start having a conversation internally. So I think that is really, really awesome. Look, I have got a couple of questions, so I'm going to ask away, if that's all right with you. You noted that a couple of things around the importance of being open to understanding whakapapa and tikanga, and I'm just really curious for you to expand on that. Like, how might people who are on front line, so they might be in a retail store if it's a telco or a bank branch, or on the phone, how might they sort of start to engage in that way? Like, how might they start that?
That's a really good question, Kate, because what we're not saying is that you have to deep dive into pepeha and make all these really significant connections, but recognizing that a person first and foremost has whakapapa. And so when we recognize that whakapapa does exist, and for those who may, I'm no expert, and I'm not going to try and give an expert answer around what whakapapa is, but really it's about your lineage. It's really about your story, because when we talk about whakapapa, in one sense, that's what we're talking about, but we're also talking about your story, so your journey. And so how are you going to connect with a person in terms of where their current situation is? Is someone ringing and their power's about to get disconnected, but we are not actually listening to a person's story around when, but the story is where we start to pick up some of the questions. And so
Yeah.
whakapapa can be recognition of that you have it, that it exists. But secondly, in this context, really, and it depends on the context you want to look at, whakapapa is about of your story. And so how do I give time and space for you to be able to share that?
Yeah. Yeah. And you talked a little bit about time, and often, I used to work in a telco. I know what it's like for frontline teams. They are often under a lot of time pressure.
Yep.
And that is one of the things that's often measured. What I do love about the wave of AI and technology and automation is that it should be able to deal with the 80 or 90% of queries that can be dealt digitally, and then free up the time for frontline to actually spend more time with those who have slightly more complex situations or different needs in terms of the support that they require. So, but you talked about time, and it can be a challenge. It can be a challenge for frontline teams. I mean, do you have any sort of extra comments to make there on that one?
Yeah, so one, we know it's important. And so if it's important, we really encourage the conversation within your team, within your spaces around how do we ensure that we can make that happen. So, which is why we're big advocates for internal guidelines. So if the internal guidelines are recognizing the value, of recognizing the importance, that actually then it gives you that kind of leeway to go. So how do we make this happen? If I'm observing some of these things and I might be a little bit concerned about that, I know that I've got the support of my organization to be able to take a person into a private space, or I've got the support to be able to be a bit more patient, take a bit longer, try to understand, and that's because the guidelines within where the space I work allow me to do that. So yeah, I think that's always a tricky one that people ask us. I mean, for those who work within the out abuse response space will probably agree with me when we go and have our first initial kōrero, we can be there for 2 hours and have absolutely no conversation around any issues or concerns that they have. So we recognise the length of time that it does take, but I guess that's what we're asking for. We know that that's really important and significant. And so the question we have is, how do you go back to your own space, your own team, and have that conversation about how you might be able to make it work in your space?
Yeah, cool. We've got a couple of questions in the Q&A, so I'll move to some of those. So we've got one from Lee. What helpful tips would you pass on to non-Māori and or Māori who have no experience in cultural practices? How can we move this from good to know to normal practice that's embedded into just how things operate? It's a big question there.
Wow, it's a massive question. I mean, shifting that much, going from knowing very little to feeling really comfortable and confident, that's a journey. That's about your whakapapa, so your story. And that's about, is it something that you really value? Is it something that's really important to you? Because giving some kind of quick tips around, oh, this is what you do, is actually would really go against what safe tikanga practice really looks like. So I guess there is no real quick way about this. It's about and I also do believe that you could use the framework, so e or u, and go, actually, and what does whanaungatanga look like for me? So not what it looks like for Māori, what does it looks like in their world? What do I understand it to be? When people come to your home, do you just open the door and just say nothing? No, I'm assuming you have a really respectful way of how you welcome people into your home. And every home is going to look really different. So when we talk about whanaungatanga, there isn't this is what whanaungatanga looks like. Whanaungatanga only works because we are bringing our true self. And that's really the quick tip, right? Is around what are each of these spaces? What is normal for me? Because if you really understand who you are, then as long as we're doing things in a really respectful way, as long as we're doing things in a really mana enhancing way, we're being tika. So we talk about tika pono aroha. So we have tika pono aroha and all our engagements. Those right there will be significant.
And like you said, it is a journey. And I think just all the people who are on this webinar, they may be quite advanced in their journey and understanding cultural practice, or they may be at the very beginning, but just being here and starting to learn and listen is a big is a great start. There's a question here from Tracy about support organisations. And actually, that was a question I had for you as well. So you mentioned Tracy's got a specific question about whaka tautua, and are they available to support people from all locations or just South Auckland? They're based in my suburb, but yeah, you share what you know about what they're able to do.
Yeah, so I know they are based in Manukau, so South Auckland, but I do believe they're also based in Moananui. Probably going to tell me if I get this wrong, but maybe close to Wellington. I do know that. So those are the only two spaces where I know that they're delivering services, but definitely ring them, give them a call, ask them some questions. They themselves might work with other Pacific organisations that we may not actively work with, and so they might be able to refer to someone in that particular area.
Cool. And then just one for the people who are in essential services that are, for-profit businesses, so telco, energy, banking, and so on and so forth. I mean, what's your advice in terms of the U of AE or U, the U's, which is around connecting to supports? Because I think there needs to be a recognition as well that a referral can often mean that it's being passed to a community service that is under-resourced, that may not have a funding line to just support the essential service sector. So what's your advice in terms of the best way for particularly for-profit essential service organisations to engage?
Yeah, I think really around partnerships, what does partnerships look like? I think it's absolutely, if you're worried or concerned about a person, please make the referral. But also I think at that kind of bigger, larger understanding of the work that is being done is that there are so many community groups that are very underfunded. We think about church groups and we think about cultural groups. They often get no funding, so it's very much run on the backs of volunteers. But they do a lot of incredible work. But also organisations who are funded are also not appropriately funded. And I think people don't realise that there's a big shortfall there. So I think really understanding what would that partnership look like if we are referring clients within our service, and that it is helpful for not only just our clients, but actually really for our bottom line as well. That actually, what is that partnership looking like for other community organisations? What are the things that are really important that we could potentially do collectively together? And how do we connect better so that we don't just become this kind of convenient line where that's really hard, it's really difficult, because this is our reality, right? That we actually get a lot of referrals because it's just too difficult. And while we don't have the expectation that that you, as whatever role you do, need to work with that person, because we know working in abuse and harm is really risky and safety is really important. But actually, when we kind of come together, we join together, we work together in partnerships, that's where we see real successes happening. And that's where we see that, the value of what we do every day. Because I know I've seen a lot of people that's jumped on, and I know them, and I know the incredible work that they do. So I really want to shout out to them and acknowledge, because the questions have been asked to me and I'm thinking straight away, let's ask them. We've got so many experts in the room that I've seen jump in today. So yeah, absolutely. Partnerships, please, would be great.
Yeah, awesome. Now we've got a couple of extra questions, but we're not going to have time to get to them. I'm just conscious we've got really only a minute left, and I do want to wrap up properly. And so what we can offer is that we will, so Lily J, we will answer your question for you outside of this webinar forum. And Charlotte, your question as well, and any others that have been popped into the Q&A that we haven't quite got to, we will respond to them. So that's a promise that Danielle and I are committed to making. Yeah. And then also Danielle has kindly offered, if there is anyone here or an organisation that want to chat with Danielle and Te Ahi Kaa further, then she welcomes that connection. So please don't feel like you can't reach out after this webinar. She's more than happy to have a little chat and just hear about what questions you might have and what you're exploring in your work. So look, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for coming along to this webinar. Maybe another virtual round of applause for Danielle. I think she's just brilliant and has so much awesome knowledge and insight and like practical advice to share as well, which is what I love. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be sending this recording out, so feel free to share it with any colleagues who you think could benefit from hearing about this. And we will close with karakia. Unahia, unahia, unahia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātia, ki māma, tīnā kau te tinana, te wairua i te ara tangata, koia rā e rongo whakaere ake ki runga, kia tīna, tīna, hui e, tai ki e. Thank you, everybody. Lovely to see you.